All right, welcome. You're going to be taking some notes in your social studies notebook. Everybody should have one. You got one in class if you didn't have one. Open it up. We're taking some notes. I'm going to be checking for it when I see you the next time in class, so make sure that you have it. Remember, the rule in social studies is anything that's underlined, you need to write it down. If it's not underlined, it is your choice on whether to write it down or not. So let's get started. Remember, we're talking about the Reconstruction era, which is the time after the Civil War when we brought the South back in. We have 4 million new people that we need to incorporate in society and the economy and kind of what that looks like. Right at the end of the Civil War, Lincoln gets elected again. This is his second election, and he picks Andrew Johnson as his running mate. Andrew Johnson was a Southern Democrat who was pro-slavery. Lincoln thought this would help solidify some of the votes in the border states and those slave states. And so he wanted to make sure he aligned himself with a Southern Democrat candidate. So Lincoln was anti-slavery, and his VP was kind of opposite, pro-slavery Southern Democrat. You need to draw this chart in your notebook. I would make it almost a full page because I think you're going to fill it. So we're going to talk about the Reconstruction plans of Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, and then the Radical Republicans. So let's start off with Lincoln. Lincoln actually wanted to go pretty light on the southern states. So he did want the southern states. So this was all like what states had to do in order to join back into the country. So he said southern states had to get rid of slavery. He was willing to forgive the Southerners who would swear allegiance to the U.S. So would say, like, the Confederacy is no more. I'm willing to come back to the country, and I swear that the U.S., I'm not going to be treasonous against the U.S. Except any Southern leaders who committed war crimes, he would not allow them to come back into the government and come back and get the full benefits of being part of the U.S. He only required 10% of the states to say okay, and then he was like, okay, you're good. So very few people in the state actually had to, swear allegiance to the United States in order to come back. He made each state write new state governments, new constitutions, and then he was fine with them rejoining and electing officials to be part of the House of Reps and Congress. So not super, harsh on the southern states who broke off. As you know, Lincoln is assassinated. I told you 4 days after the Civil War in class, but it's actually 5 days after the Civil War. He was sitting in a play, and John Wilkes Booth, who was a Southern sympathizer, assassinates him and shoots him. So his VP becomes the leader, and that is Andrew Johnson. And Andrew Johnson, again, is a Southern pro-slavery Democrat. His plan that you're putting into the chart is pretty similar to Lincoln, so you can say same as Lincoln, except he's going to make the Southern states pass the 13th Amendment, so officially ban slavery in the Constitution. So there are a lot of people who are unhappy with being so light on the South, and this includes a group of congressmen in the U.S. House and Senate, and we call them the Radical Republicans. They want to go super hard on the South. You can put this below your chart, what Radical Republicans are. They're congresspeople who want to punish the South and give equality to African Americans. They are ready to reorganize the South completely, and Andrew Johnson is not. So the Radical Republicans plan that you're going to put into this chart, they right away passed the 14th Amendment giving citizenship to African Americans. Andrew Johnson is going to try to fight against that. They passed the 1867 Reconstruction Act that starts to put the army into the South to kind of help keep the peace, if you will. Johnson vetoes that, and they override him anyway. Johnson tries to stop all the things the Radical Republicans are doing. They reverse Lincoln and Johnson's effort to go south soft on the South. So anything Johnson and Lincoln forgave, the Radical Republicans were like, we're not forgiving that. We're punishing them. Confederate leaders were told they couldn't vote or hold office. That was in the 14th Amendment. And then Southern states must give African Americans the right to vote was the other condition for the Radical Republicans plan. So here's the stuff kind of that you just wrote down. Again, remember to pause the video if you need to. Okay, so moving on, below the chart, you can start writing your other notes. So part of the Radical Republicans plan was the Military Reconstruction Act of 1867, which brought the Northern Army into the South to kind of keep the peace between the angry South, who had just lost the war, and helped to organize what was going on with the 4 million free people that were now in the South. And they divided the South into 5 military districts. You often do this when you are trying to rebuild from war because it's easier to organize a smaller piece of land than it is a whole chunk of land. So they organized 5 different districts. They create the Freedmen's Bureau, which is a government agency that provided food, medical care, and this lasts for 4 years after the Civil War until Johnson gets rid of it. A bureau, that's kind of a weird word. It can mean a piece of furniture, but it can also mean organization. So when we say Freedmen's Bureau, we mean Freedmen's like organization, government organization. The Freedmen's Bureau also provides food, clothing, hospitals, and medical care. It opens 4,000 new schools for poor white children and black children, opened historically black universities, and it sets out to not only help these former slaves, but also help the poor white Southerners could benefit from it as well. Here's an ad for freedmen. It says, all freedmen at or near Shreveport, Louisiana have no employment or means of support are hereby ordered to report at this office without delay to give them jobs. Actually, that kind of goes with the black codes. I'm going to put that down there. There we go. Okay. This was in a newspaper. People in the South, and we'll talk about this more in class, there are many people who fought against helping free African Americans at all. And this is a very racist caricature of an African American person. And we'll talk about blackface and minstrels in class and where those kind of images come from. But people really fought, and Andrew Johnson fought against the Freedmen's Bureau, saying that African Americans who came off the plantations should just have to do things themselves. They shouldn't get any more government help. So the South, of course, wanting to keep those Southern structures, that Southern racist system, create these black codes, similar to the Jim Crow laws that we talked about in class. It makes it illegal for African Americans to be unemployed. You had to sign a job contract every single year or you could be arrested. You had to carry a special pass to travel from place to place. They made it illegal to vote and illegal to serve on a jury. So this is where this ad comes in, saying that you need to come find employment or you're out of contract. So then the radical Republicans turn around and pass the 15th Amendment. And that is the amendment, we talked about this in class, that bans people from discriminating on voting based on color. So that was a direct, a direct action because of these black codes that were trying to stop African Americans from voting. So this stuff is not underlined. You do not have to write it down, but listen. So Johnson, president at the time, fought against all this stuff the radical Republicans were doing because he supported the South. He went on this huge circle speaking tour around the country. He was drunk for a lot of it. He went around telling people he wished the Confederacy won. He like I said before, he tried to stop the 14th Amendment passage. He tried to stop the Freedmen's Bureau. He complained about the Africanization of the country, that black people were taking over the country. And then he forgave all of the Confederates for all of their crimes, and we'll talk about in class, also giving back the plantation owners their land. So Johnson wasn't, he helped no one. So Congress tries to fight back and limit his power. The radical Republicans, as you can imagine, were super upset with him. So they passed the Command Army Act to try to limit his control over the Army. Remember that part of the executive branch is that they're commander of the Army. So they try to limit that. And then they also passed the Tenure of Office Act, which barred him from firing any top government officials without the Senate's approval, because they were afraid he was just going to put in his lackeys and then it was going to turn into, a Confederate government again. Well, Johnson right away goes and fires somebody, and that's what they bring him up on impeachment. So Johnson is actually the very first president to be impeached. Again, you can't impeach a president just because you don't like them. They have to have done something illegal. So what he did was go against this law that they had passed by firing somebody. They go through the whole trial, and he's found not guilty by one vote in the Senate, and he gets to keep on in the presidency. So So it was very contentious between the radical Republicans and Johnson after the war, and we'll talk more about this in class.